We have brand new June DLF ADP, so it's time for another version of my Dynasty spin on Guy Fieri's diners, drive-ins, and dives to scour through the ugly parts of Dynasty ADP and find those hidden gems among the muck. So welcome into another episode of Dynasty Fallers, Fill-ins, and Flyers. First up, we have our faller, who at one point in his career, just a couple years ago, was once valued as a top 5 Dynasty running back, but now isn't even valued inside the top 80 at the position. But you guys know me, you know that I'm all about handcuff running backs, and there may not be a more completely free, yet super high upside handcuff in fantasy right now than Clyde Edwards-Helaire. The argument here is pretty simple. The only running backs behind Isaiah Pacheco in this Chiefs backfield right now are CEH, Deneric Prince, and a bunch of whatevers. Jerick McKinnon was not re-signed as a free agent. The Chiefs actually actively chose to not re-sign Jerick McKinnon and instead re-sign Clyde Edwards-Helaire this offseason, which adds even more confidence for me that CEH is the established backup in this backfield. So if Isaiah Pacheco gets hurt and misses any time at all, which seems like a more than likely situation given his running style and how he plays, and he did miss 3 games last year, if Pacheco is out, CEH would take over as the workhorse running back for the Kansas City Chiefs during those weeks. And we actually saw this happen for a 2-game stretch last year with Isaiah Pacheco out. CEH was a starter and played 50 to 60% of snaps, averaged 15 touches per game, around 80 yards per game. He did score once and he put up 9 PPR points in the first week and 20 PPR points the following week. That's more than enough production to spot start you a week and save you a win during the middle of a season. Plus, on the off chance that he scores a touchdown, catches a few passes, and puts up 20 fantasy points, that could actually help you win a week and not just scrape by. So do not overlook Clyde Edwards-Helaire as a valuable handcuff for your roster this season. Add him in as a throw-in in your next trade, or even double check your waiver wire because he still might be out there free to just pick up. It's these types of players that are perennially undervalued every single season, but become extremely valuable in season when they do get a chance to start. And you just got Clyde Edwards-Helaire for basically free now in June. Next up is our fill-in, and it is Zay Jones, who signed a 1-year deal with the Arizona Cardinals this offseason and is actually the guy that I'm projecting to be the wide receiver 2 in Arizona for 2024. And let me be clear here that I think Michael Wilson has a ton more upside. He might be honestly better than Zay Jones at this point in their careers, and Wilson is definitely the Cardinals receiver that I'd prefer after Marvin Harrison Jr. in Dynasty. But so does everybody else, to the point where Zay Jones isn't even being drafted in our 1-quarterback mock drafts. He does not have an ADP, but again, I think has a more than decent shot at being 3rd on the team in targets this year as the wide receiver 2 behind MHJ. Over the last 2 seasons with the Jaguars, Jones has been the de facto wide receiver 2 or 3 on the Jaguars behind Christian Kirk and or Calvin Ridley, depending on the year and the week. And in 25 games played, Jones averaged 7.5 targets per game, 4.5 receptions, 45 yards per game, and on a 17-game pace is basically 80 for 800 and a handful of touchdowns. Now, those aren't crazy elite numbers, but double-digit points per game is a solid wide receiver 3 in fantasy, and that 17-game stat line is almost exactly what Zay Flowers and Tyler Lockett produced last year, and is also in the neighborhood of guys like Drake London, Jacoby Myers, and Josh Downs. Now he's in Arizona. We know that Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride are going to lead this team in targets pretty easily, but that 3rd option is wide open between Jones, between Wilson, Greg Dortch. Rondale Moore is gone. He's on the Falcons. So on a team that's probably going to throw like 35-ish times a game, if Jones can just soak in 5, 6, 7 targets consistently every week, he's going to be a fantasy relevant guy as a flex option more often than not. And for the low price of free 99 or even a waiver wire ad right now, that is just too good of a chance to pass up as like your wide receiver 7 in your roster that fills in for bye weeks or injuries, or even if you just need an extra startable option if you start 11 or 12 guys a week. And then lastly, we have our flyer, or flyers, I should say, because it's 2 late-round tight ends that both have a shot at a starting job on a team this year, and that is Daniel Bellinger and Theo Johnson of the New York Giants, who both had the door for the tight end 1 role open up in New York after Darren Waller officially announced his retirement. Both of these guys are sitting outside the top 30 in tight end ADP, so it makes sense to just take a shot on both of them just to see what happens in training camp. Now, I will say of the 2, I do prefer Theo Johnson because I think he has more upside because of the type of player and athlete that he is. Johnson is 2 inches taller and 6 pounds heavier than Daniel Bellinger. He also ran ran a faster 40 than Bellinger at that bigger size. Johnson's burst score was higher, he ran a faster shuttle, and Johnson was more productive than Bellinger in college at a much higher competition level at Penn State versus San Diego State. Now, if I'm being honest, I do think that whoever ultimately wins the tight end 1 job in New York is still not going to be a fantastic fantasy tight end. They would be a starting tight end in the NFL, and that's great, but that's still for the New York Giants. That's still catching passes from Daniel Jones, and what is probably at best the second option on the team behind Malik Neighbors, if not more likely the third or fourth option behind Wan'Dale Robinson, maybe even Darius Slayton or Jalen Hyatt. I don't see the next breakout superstar in either of these two, like this year's version of Trey McBride or anything like that. I don't see that. I think at best, you're looking at a possible streaming option every week, much like guys like Luke Musgrave, Tucker Kraft, Hunter Henry, Juwan Johnson, all of whom are actually top 25 tight ends in ADP. And I think they have the ultimate like 1% ceiling upside of being like a Pat Freiermuth, Dallas Goedert, Dalton Schultz type of player. But again, both Bellinger and Johnson are outside the top 30 in ADP, so they are cheap enough that you can just take the shot on both of them and see who wins the job and if they are even productive with that job. Bellinger might actually still be on waiver wires right now in your league, and if your rookie draft hasn't happened yet, you can draft Theo Johnson in the 4th round in either 1 quarterback or superflex leagues. Both of these guys are that cheap, yet have potential to gain decent value if they win the starting job.